coming of the white men, slavery was abolished, and slave trails were replaced by iron rails.
The Indian coolies were no longer confined to the sugar plantations. In South Africa, the growing railway network required cheap manual labor to continue blazing its trail across the African plains.
The trail, crawling across the vast African countryside, looks like a tiny insect.
By the dawn of the 20th century, over 100,000 Indians were working for the British in Africa, on the railways and in the cane fields and the mines. But the status of Indians within the empire was about to change. In 1893, a young Indian lawyer arrived in Durban and set up his first legal practice. Over the next 20 years, this young man would change drastically from a middle-class lawyer to an extraordinary political leader. His name was Ghandi.
Ghandi got to know about indentured laborers very soon after arriving here. His first major contact with an indentured worker was in 1894. The man was beaten by his employer and had his front two teeth smashed, and the man was in terrible distress and came into Ghandi's legal offices.
This encounter would mark a turning point in the young lawyer's life. Ghandi began his campaign against indentured labor by exposing the plight of the Indians at public meetings, but he quickly realized that the future lay in unifying the isolated Indian community. The result was the first Indian newspaper in Africa.
Indian Opinion begins to chronicle the conditions that indentured workers lived under and the poor housing conditions, the poor food that they had, treatment by employers. It is a rich chronicle of grievances.
Gandhi's newspaper exposed the realities of indentured labor worldwide, but the written word was not his only weapon.
It was meant that this paper would reach British India, it would reach authorities in England, that it changed to become a paper of mobilizing people. It begins to take a very important role in motivating people to go to jail. So it becomes a paper which says jail is an honorable place to be when the laws are unjust.
The method Ghandi pioneered to end indentured labor became known as passive resistance, a sustained campaign of non-violent protest based on the principle of civil disobedience. It was the first time this technique had ever been used, and it would bring the young lawyer into direct conflict with the British legal system. Ghandi and many of his followers ended up serving jail sentences at the prison fort in Johannesburg.
His first imprisonment occurs in January 1908, and Ghandi realizes that in order to seek change, one needs to go into prison to protest these laws, and by one's imprisonment to make the grievance come to the attention of the authorities and to secure its removal. If you think of the people who are coming to jail, the majority of them were traders and hawkers, and many of them were fairly respectable middle-class traders, come from, comfortable lifestyles, and to suffer humiliation in the prisons was very difficult for a lot of them.
Johannesburg, 1908. The struggle to end indentured labor was building into a national crisis. Indian merchants, laborers, and their families willingly went to prison in an effort to bring the system down. Within months, Ghandi and his followers had filled the jails of South Africa to capacity. Over the next 5 years, Ghandi would be imprisoned on 4 separate occasions. But going to jail was only the beginning of Gandhi's revolutionary strategy. Even from his prison cell, he used his newspaper to keep up pressure on the authorities.
I shall have no opportunity of writing for Indian Opinion, as I shall be serving a sentence of imprisonment. The hardships of jail life are mostly imaginary. Keep absolutely firm to the end. Suffering is our only remedy. Victory is certain.
It would be another 5 years before Gandhi's campaign to end indentured labor would reach its climax. 5 years of repeated beatings and imprisonments. But Ghandi did not persevere alone. His wife and children, including Uma's grandfather, aged just 18, served prison sentences by his side.
So they said second cell? Think of an 18-year-old boy who wants to go to London to study to be a lawyer. Who ends up sitting in jail. But I mean, he did it willingly and he was happy to do it. And he went again and over again. Yeah, I think it's just a shock to see the solitary cells.
The history of the Ghandi family's struggle in South Africa is well documented. But in South America, David Dabadine has yet to find a single reference to his indentured great-grandfather.
Coming from Calcutta, starting with the Lord Hungerford, 1845. And here you have the index, and you're looking for the Apolline. Oh, I have the Apolline here, because this paper's been around since 1845.
You mean to say when I turn the page in a minute, I'm going to find this old man?
Oh, yes. Page 215.
Oh dear. Yes, the name. He's not there, is he?
What's his name here?
This is a list of the Indians themselves, I assume.
Yes.
But he's not there, is he? Think we got him?
Yep.
I think we have him. Ships from Calcutta. Aha, now he must be here.
Now,
Well, let's turn to
let's go to
1855.
the front. It's the index.
Yeah, Apolline.
The Apolline. Folio tape.
Yeah, wait, 50. Aha, look at him.
Yeah,
Look, we traced him, right? God, look at him.
Yes, David. 24.
Dabadine. Tell me when he came. 14th of June, 1855. So 14th of June. Yeah, I tell you, nobody in my family's ever seen this, you know. Evan, I'm grateful to you, right?
His father's name
Father's
here is
name.
Purrotty.
T.Y. Porwati. How was
Okay,
that?
male,
Males.
age
What's that?
27.
Oh, he was 27 when he
Yes.
came. Well, he was 27
Yes, he
years.
was 27. Okay, yes. And here he died in 1912. His death certificate number is 479 of 1912.
When he died? Well, he died 1912. So what is that 479, 1912?
That's the ID number.
Yeah.
So you have to go at the back and look for 479 1912 and you'll find
So
the death
with
certificate.
479, you'd find it. I suppose that's the date of his death, you know? Because you always think you're going to find the old man. You never really believe he died. Because he's been such a memory, such a kind of a legend and a rumor in our minds. Until you see it says dead in very heavy, really sad, heavy, sad, dark writing. He ceases to be a legend and a rumor in your mind because he actually died in 1912. I never expected, this came as a shock to me, I never expected that I would also see his death. So that this has been very shocking, you know. And the bluntness of it, after all those years of pulley work, it just ends dead. 479. Where did that number come from? Was he the 479 pulley to die?
For that particular period, probably.
Really? Well, he chose an odd number. Huh? Oh, there he is.
The year of the Titanic.
Did the Titanic go down in 1912? The Titanic went down in 1912. So when the Titanic was going down in 1912, this little pulley was also going down.
While the Indian coolies continued to toil in the sugar plantations of South America and the West Indies, it was events on the other side of the world that would finally turn the tide against the whole system of indentured labour. News of Gandhi's campaign in South Africa had reached London, and the idea of an Indian uprising became a very real threat. The Indian problem was the obsession of one man, General Smuts, the Prime Minister of Natal. He demanded that his friends in Westminster rid Africa of what he called the Asiatic cancer that they had introduced. They began by enforcing an impossible tax on the Indians.
I think the intention of the Natal government was to make the lives of the indentured workers hard. If they were not going to pay this tax, then they would have to be perpetually indentured. If they were going to be free, they were never able to earn substantial amounts of money. It was an impossible tax, and it was meant to be an impossible tax.
Gandhi didn't give up. He continued to hold protest meetings and invited Indian political leaders to come to South Africa and see how badly the empire treated its Indian citizens. In November 1913, Gandhi launched his biggest campaign to date. He began by addressing Natal's coal miners, persuading the indentured workers to come out in protest against the government. Soon over 15,000 indentured workers from the nearby sugar estates also joined the strike. 20,000 people responded to Gandhi's call. These are the only surviving photographs of that protest in 1913 and show Gandhi himself at the moment of his arrest. They also capture the birth of civil disobedience. Many of the protesters were brutally beaten and imprisoned by British officers, and Gandhi was sentenced to 9 months in prison.
Here was an Indian rising to prominence with a particular political message, directed ultimately, as we all know, at India itself, but speaking to the condition of Indians worldwide. And the condition worldwide was basically indentured labour. And it's at that point, and the kind of upheavals which followed Gandhi's message, that leads imperial figures to speak out against indentured labour itself.
Even from within the establishment, unlikely voices were moved to announce that indenture could not be allowed to continue. One was Lord Hardinge, the Viceroy of India.
Indians in South Africa have violated these laws with full knowledge of the penalties involved. In all this, they have the sympathies of India, deep and burning, and not only of India, but of those who, like myself, have feelings of sympathy for the people of this country.
Whitehall was outraged. Increasingly frantic internal communications warned that Gandhi's coolies were becoming martyrs. The cabinet discussed Hardinge's immediate recall, but didn't want to agitate an already delicate situation. Indentured emigration was suspended pending further investigation as Britain entered the First World War.
Who in 1914 could say that this system makes any sense in the world of the 20th century? It's as antediluvian as slavery had once become in a century earlier.
While Britain turned its attention to other more pressing matters, the man who had arrived in South Africa as a young middle-class lawyer was preparing to leave a completely changed man.
Even all foolish. I was an insignificant coolie lawyer.
Take Gandhi, the lawyer, in 1906 in a Western suit, and take Gandhi on the eve of his departure from South Africa, dressed in very Indian traditional dress, but very simple rustic dress. In his dress in 1914, when he's leaving, he's signaling his identification with an indentured working class, that this is the identity that he wishes to be associated with. This is a Gandhi who has managed to find a mass following. And the nutshell of what is Gandhism is very much in shape in 1914. And it's in India that he then begins to apply whatever he has learned in South Africa to a bigger project, the freedom of India.
The British scattered 1.5 million Indian people to all corners of the globe, with all kinds of consequences right down to the present day. If you consider many of the great political upheavals of the last 30 years in the old British Empire, the tensions in Fiji between Fijians and Indian peoples, the extraordinary expulsion by Amin of Asians from Uganda, the extraordinary demographic confusions of South Africa brought about by people settled there by the British, all of this a direct consequence of British imperial and economic policy in the world at large.
The The Indian coolies may have become a distant memory, but their legacy refuses to go away. Freed from indenture, they forged their own communities and abandoned colonies around the world, becoming lawyers, doctors, entrepreneurs. In countries from the Caribbean to the South Pacific, Indians formed the majority of the population, and in some took political power, but they have now become victims of their own success.
What started as a peaceful prayer meeting in central Suva turned into violence with the arrival of about 100 angry Fijians. Armed soldiers and police stood by as the Fijians went on the rampage. From the relative safety of the Suva Travelodge, journalists watched as Fijians beat Indians.
In 1987, ethnic violence and rioting in Fiji led to a series of coups which ousted the Indian-dominated government.
Today, 10 rebel soldiers stormed inside the Parliament building and marched them all off at gunpoint. The Prime Minister, Dr. Timothy Bavadra, along with the Deputy Prime Minister, one of 19 Indians dominating the government since last month's election in racially divided Fiji.
Now, more than a century after they were first transported around the empire, the legacy of indentured labour has come back to haunt the Indians of Fiji. The new Fijian nationalist government is enforcing archaic British laws dating back to the period of indenture, laws which prohibit Indians from owning land. As land leases come up, they are not being renewed. Thousands are being displaced and impoverished. Stranded in refugee camps with no country willing to accept them, the cause of their plight, the British system of indentured labour, has been quietly forgotten by the rest of the world.
If you look at all that and think of this as a kind of function of grand British imperial design, all designed for British betterment, for our well-being, but who so much knows about it now, who so much thinks about it, there is an extraordinary discrepancy between what the British did and what they remember they did.
I hope to ensure that the hardship that they have endured, the difficulties that they have encountered in the long and hard journey from India to the plantations and from plantations to now is remembered by posterity. Okay, boys and girls, I will read to you one poem which I learned in class 3. रात अंधेरी, हवा सनसनी, पाल फड़फड़ाते थे ऊपर, सीरिया आगे बढ़ा चला था, फीजी सागर की छाती पर का एक हुआ धड़ाका, सीरिया टकरा चट्टानों से, एक तरफ वो सीधे डूबा, मची कोलाहल सब लोगों में, डूब मरे मल्लाह यात्री समा गए. Syria was the worst disaster in the history of Indian indentured emigration to Fiji. 57 people died at Nasilai. The image of wreck resonates with the experience of my people today. More than 120 years later, they feel that they're shipwrecked in this place. Syria reminds me of history repeating itself. I've devoted most of my adult life trying to understand the experience of Indian people in Fiji. It's very emotional because I'm not talking about a group of people in the abstract. I'm talking about people from whom I am descended. I found it haunting. The ghosts of the past haunting the place, reminding us of the sacrifices, the difficulties our people faced.
dandruff and oil delivers twice the protective ingredients. Try now.
I am the greatest.
He's one of the most influential men of his time.
Muhammad Ali was a world figure. He was a figure of inspiration.
I shook up the world!
As civil unrest ignites the 60s, he joins the Nation of Islam and becomes an incendiary and outspoken leader.
Now that I'm a Muslim, now that he gave me the beautiful name of Muhammad Ali, now I can go all over the world.
But when he refuses to go to Vietnam, to many he becomes one of the most hated men in America.
Muhammad Ali has just refused to be inducted into the United States Armed Forces.
They said he was a draft dodger. Everybody hated him for this cause. There were people who felt that he was a traitor to the country that had made him rich and famous.
Stripped of his heavyweight title, threatened with prison, he takes on the fight of his life.
What made Muhammad Ali revolutionary was that he was willing to give up his career for a belief.
Whatever the persecution is for standing up for my religious beliefs, I will face it. I'm ready to die.
Ali was the voice of all of us who believe in standing up.
Can't you look at me and tell that I'm free?
These are the counterculture icons who changed the world. In this hour, Muhammad Ali, Lords of the Revolution.
My New Year's revolution is to knock out that big ugly bear, shake up the whole world in 1964, and talk no more.
It's February of 1964, and all eyes are on Miami, where Cassius Clay will take on title holder Sonny Liston for the heavyweight championship of the world.
Sonny might be great, but he will leave in 8. If he want to go to heaven, I'll get him in 7. And if he don't want to fight, he should keep himself home that night.
In the 60s, boxing still was a test of manhood in America. The heavyweight champion of the world was the toughest guy on the planet. And the champion at that time was Sonny Liston. Unbeatable in any way.
Sonny, what's going to happen in February to your friend over on the right? I'm going to kill him. I see.
The idea that this young 22-year-old kid was just could even compete with the meanest, scariest guy in the face of the earth was incomprehensible.
A gold medal winner as a light heavyweight at the 1960 Rome Olympics, Clay has earned his title shot by winning the first 19 of his professional fights.
Speed, balance, reflex. Heavyweights were considered slow, sloppy guys. He was so agile, it was scary.
To the American public, Clay is seen as a brash and outrageous character. The Louisville Lip is known largely for his mouth.
I am the greatest.
You talk too much.
He was born, my mother said, talking. Always predicted I'm going to be the greatest of all times. Even as, like, we first started boxing in 1953, he was 12 years old. He said, I'm going to be the champ of the world. And he was very confident.
For all of the people, if you like to gamble and lose your money, then let them bet it on Sonny.
Not only was he a boxer, he had a record out. He was a show. He'd come on television. You ever seen a kid post and brag and do that shuffle he did with his feet? This was beautiful.
I can't beat me. I had 180 amateur fights, 22 professional fights, and I'm pretty the girl.
But he was telling the truth. I mean, he wasn't just talking. I mean, the guy backed it up. It looked good, you know?
I'm too pretty to be a fighter.
He was the only one with box office appeal. You know, he seemed to embody what people thought, were the 60s, the new generation.
What about strategy for this fight, Cassius? Anything I should expect to see? Well, you know how great I am. I don't have to tell you about my strategy. Let my trainer tell you. Bodine, come here. Bodine, tell him, what are we going to do? You're going to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Rumble, young man, rumble.
What the public doesn't know is that Clay has a very controversial secret. For the last 2 years, he has been a member of a black Muslim sect known as the Nation of Islam.
They were the most outspoken and organized of all the black-led organizations, and they were very controversial.
Let no one underestimate the Muslims. They have their own parochial schools, where Muslim children are taught to hate the white man.
With the civil rights movement reaching a fever pitch, the issue of race relations is riveting the nation.
Mysterious bombings by assailants unknown plague the lives and property of the Negro people.
It's the 60s in America, and there are lynchings and there are churches being blown up and there are young black men being murdered.
While mainstream civil rights groups seek an end to segregation, the Nation of Islam, led by Elijah Muhammad and his fiery minister Malcolm X, preached the separation of the races.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
Malcolm could speak, and he spoke the language that young, particularly young black men, understood.
Stung by the racial discrimination he experienced growing up in the segregated southern city of Louisville, Kentucky, Clay is inspired by the nation's message.
Here was a group that told him he was beautiful, strong, he was better than the white people who discriminated against him and called him the Olympic nigger after he came back with a gold medal, who kind of gave him a sense of self and purpose, which was really very powerful. It made a lot of sense.
Clay becomes fast friends with Malcolm X, who he views as a spiritual and political mentor.
He would be with Malcolm and he was like running together like buddies, you know what I'm saying? Like the Rat Pack, you know?
But when Malcolm arrives in Miami, his presence threatens to expose Clay's ties to the Nation of Islam. There's even talk of canceling his title fight with Sonny Liston.
The rumors are persisting that this fight's going to be a financial flop. Is there anything that you can point to that might have caused this?
The Muslim thing might have slowed it down.
The night of the fight, the atmosphere is filled with conspiracy.
There were so many rumors going around this fight that nothing made sense. He was going to be murdered in the ring. He was going to be poisoned through his water bottle. Liston had been paid millions of dollars.
He really had some kahunas. I think we truly forget sometimes what kind of environment the world was when such people as Muhammad Ali were making changes and which would impact society on a whole. His showmanship for selling fights, promotion, was truly remarkable. And again, to be doing it in such a volatile time, it really adds to the character of the man. SIP to Muhammad Ali and to all the great boxers, young and old. A moment of recollection for all the blood, guts and tears.
Rumors are persisting that this fight's going to be a financial flop. Is there anything that you can point to that might have caused this?
The Muslim thing might have slowed it down.
The night of the fight, the atmosphere is filled with conspiracy.
There were so many rumors going around this fight that nothing made sense. He was going to be murdered in the ring. He was going to be poisoned through his water bottle. Liston had been paid millions of dollars to throw this fight by the Nation of Islam. The sense of tension and paranoia was impossible to cut through.
As they enter the ring, Liston stares Clay down.
He's trying his best, the psychological warfare that goes up and down, and Clay just laughs at it, backs away.
He got in the ring and started to pick Liston apart. It was obvious that he was too quick for him.
Clay well left and a right attack. Liston's eye badly cut. The bell end of round 3.
But in the fourth round, it suddenly seems that Clay is blinded.
He can't see, with all this fear and paranoia floating around, Cassius Clay's first reaction was, they're trying to blind me.
There was the idea and the belief that Sonny Liston's corner had put...
The tension and paranoia was impossible to cut through.
As they enter the ring, Liston stares Clay down.
He's trying his best, the psychological warfare that goes up and down, and Clay just laughs at it, backs away.
He got in the ring and started to pick Liston apart. It was obvious that he was too quick for him.
Clay well left and a right attack. Liston's eye badly cut. The bell end of round 3.
But in the fourth round, it suddenly seems that Clay is blinded.
He can't see, with all this fear and paranoia floating around, Cassius Clay's first reaction was, they're trying to blind me.
There was the idea and the belief that Sonny Liston's corner had put some type of oil or ointment on Liston's gloves that got in Clay's eyes.
He says, cut the gloves off. I said, wait a minute, we're fighting for the title, sit down. I put my pinky in his eye and put it in my eye. It burnt. It was a caustic substance in both eyes. What I did, I got the sponge, washed it out, cleaned it out, and I said, get up. And I made him stand up. I said, run.
Clay answers the bell and somehow stays out of range until his eyes clear.
When the next round come out, he just cut Sonny up. Beat him up bad. Bust him up. So Sonny quit. He just said, I ain't going back out.
It burnt. It was a caustic substance in both eyes. What I did, I got the sponge, washed it out, cleaned it out, and I said, get up. I made him stand up. I said, run.
Clay answers the bell and somehow stays out of range until his eyes clear.
When the next round come out, he just cut Sonny up. Beat him up bad. Bust him up. So Sonny quit. He just said, I ain't going back out. Bust him up. So Sonny quit. He just said, I ain't going back out. Bust him up. So Sonny quit. He just said, I ain't going back out. Beat him up bad. Bust him up. So Sonny quit. He just said, I ain't going back out. Beat him up bad. Bust him up. So Sonny quit. He just said, I ain't going back out.
Afterwards, of course, there was a race to Arthur. You